Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the mud-caked, blister-ridden world of medieval peasants. And trust me, it's not as romantic as fairy tales would have you believe. Picture this. You're waking up on a cold, damp morning in a one-room cottage that's somehow both smoky and drafty at the same time. Your bed is a pile of straw infested with fleas, your roof leaks when it feels like it, and your bathroom well, wherever you can manage without being seen. Welcome to your life. Let's be honest. You probably wouldn't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the time you're watching. Always fun to see who else is dozing off to plague talk at 3 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease to tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the smell. Your little hovel, built from wattle and daub, which is a fancy way of saying sticks and mud smeared with dung, traps smoke from the fire pit in the middle of the room. There's no chimney. Instead, the smoke just finds its way out through holes in the thatched roof, or not. Your eyes sting constantly, but that's just how things are. Your family, maybe 5 or 6 people, all share this one space. You eat here, sleep here, occasionally bring in livestock to protect them from thieves in the cold. Privacy? That's a concept for kings and bishops, not for you. Every morning, you pull on the same rough-spun tunic you wore yesterday, and every day before that. Laundry isn't exactly a top priority when water involves hauling heavy buckets from the village well, and in the dead of winter, that water might be frozen solid anyway. Fun times. Outside, the earth squelches under your feet. Mud is a year-round companion, even more so if you live in northern Europe. Wooden walkways are rare luxuries, so your boots, if you're lucky enough to have boots, are perpetually caked in filth. In fact, historians still argue whether peasants even bothered with footwear most days, or if they simply developed very, very tough soles. Your life is ruled by the land. You don't own it, of course. You're a serf, legally bound to the Lord's estate. Think of it like a gym membership you can't cancel, except instead of treadmills, you get endless manual labor. You till the fields, sow crops, harvest grain, and give a hefty portion of everything you grow to the manor, rent, taxes, tithes. It all adds up, and somehow there's never quite enough left for your own family. But hey, at least you've got the village. It's a small, tight-knit cluster of hovels like yours, maybe with a blacksmith, a mill, and of course the parish church looming over everything. Sundays are a mixed blessing, a respite from labor, but also a reminder from the priest that your suffering is part of God's plan. Comforting, isn't it? One quirky little detail. Many peasants believed in house spirits, small mischievous creatures that could either bless your home or curse it, depending on how well you treated them. Leaving out a crust of bread for these brownies or kobolds was common practice. After all, when life throws famine and plague at you, you'll take help from wherever you can get it. Speaking of pests, you're never truly alone. Fleas, lice, rats, they're part of the family. No medieval peasant would have considered themselves dirty per se. Cleanliness just meant wiping the visible grime off your hands and face. Baths were rare luxuries, often communal, and more common in warmer months when you wouldn't freeze solid trying to wash. And yet, despite all this, you're resilient. You have to be. Every season brings a new challenge, Spring means sowing and praying for favorable weather. Summer demands relentless work from sunrise to sunset. Autumn brings the harvest, a back-breaking rush to gather crops before the cold sets in. And winter? Winter is when you hope last year's stores will last, because growing fresh food is out of the question. Entertainment is simple, but cherished. Storytelling by the fire, village fairs, when you can afford to spare a day, and the occasional traveling minstrel bring a spark of joy to an otherwise monotonous existence. Music, dance, and even crude puppetry offer moments of escape. But beneath the daily grind lies a simmering frustration. You're doing all the work, yet your Lord reaps most of the rewards. You pay taxes to him, tithes to the church, and still have to barter for essentials like salt and iron tools. The social pyramid is steep, and you're firmly at the bottom. One of the stranger customs you might encounter is the boon work day, when the entire village is expected to work the Lord's fields without pay, often in exchange for a measly feast or vague promises of protection. Some historians debate whether peasants saw these days as oppressive or simply part of the communal rhythm of life. Either way, you don't get a choice. And let's not forget your Lord's favorite pastime, hunting. Entire forests are off limits to you, reserved for noble sport. Poaching is a crime punishable by death, or worse, mutilation. But hunger makes people bold, and the quiet snares set in forbidden woods are silent acts of defiance. Still, your world is small. Most peasants never travel more than a few miles from their birthplace. News of distant wars, royal decrees, or even plagues arrive slowly, often distorted through rumor and superstition. When a stranger appears in the village, it's both exciting and deeply suspicious. But through all this, you endure. You find joy in small things. A good harvest, a healthy lamb, a neighbor's wedding. The cycle of life continues, grim yet stubbornly hopeful. So as you trudge through the muck, breathing in smoke, and dodging your Lord's tax collector, remember, this is just the beginning. The real tests of survival are yet to come. You wake up sore again. Every inch of your body reminds you that being a medieval peasant isn't just a job. It's a full-body workout you never signed up for. Your back aches from bending over fields, your hands are rough and cracked from endless labor, and your knees complain bitterly every time you stand. But you don't get to take a sick day. You belong to the land, and that land belongs to your Lord. The feudal system isn't exactly subtle. Picture a pyramid where you're at the very bottom, wedged beneath layers of nobility, clergy, and knights, all enjoying their comforts on your dime. You're not a slave, technically, but as a serf, your freedom is more theoretical than practical. You can't leave the village without permission. You owe your lord labor, crops, livestock, and a litany of fees with names so charmingly medieval they sound made up. Harriet, for example, is a death tax. When you die, your lord gets your best animal as a little farewell gift. Isn't that sweet? You plow fields that aren't yours, tend animals you can't eat, and repair roads for travelers whose boots are fancier than anything you'll ever wear. Some tasks are communal, like maintaining the Lord's mill or building fences. But make no mistake, the lion's share of the benefit goes uphill. Feudal obligations are a tangled web. You owe days of weak work, unpaid labor for your Lord's land. Then there's boon work, those festive but not really work parties where you harvest the Lord's crops in exchange for a meager feast. Historians still argue whether Boone work was a cherished tradition of community spirit or just exploitation dressed up with a side of ale. And then come the rents. You might pay in grain, eggs, wool, or cold hard coins, assuming you ever see coins. Money is a slippery thing in your world. Most transactions are bartered, but lords and priests are happy to charge you in currency you don't actually possess. Your life is governed by the manor court, where the Lord Steward presides over disputes and doles out punishments. Step on the wrong side of customary law, and you might find yourself fined for crimes as thrilling as letting your pigs roam unsupervised or failing to bake your bread in the Lord's oven. Yes, you have to pay to use his oven. Private ovens? That's aristocrat talk. One peculiar tidbit. Did you know some lords claim the right of banalités? It's a fancy way of saying you had to pay them to use essential village equipment like mills, presses, or wine vats. Can't press your own olives or grind your own grain without coughing up a fee. Medieval life, where even your bread costs twice. Yet in the cracks of this rigid hierarchy, you find ways to breathe. Customary rights, unwritten but fiercely defended, offer you certain protections. You might have rights to common pastures, woodlands for firewood, or even limited hunting of small game. Emphasis on small. These communal resources are lifelines, though constantly threatened by greedy lords eager to enclose lands for their private use. You're also part of a tight-knit village community. Everyone knows everyone else's business, for better or worse. Gossip travels faster than any messenger. Marriages, births, and feuds are all public affairs. Your neighbors might annoy you, but in times of crisis, say when a sudden storm flattens your thatch roof, they're often the first to lend a hand. Mutual survival has a way of fostering solidarity. Still, there's an undercurrent of tension. The Great Revolt hasn't happened yet, but you feel its roots taking hold. Every new tax, every arbitrary demand from the manor fuels a slow-burning resentment. You might not know much about politics, but you know unfairness when you're living it. There's also the church, hovering over your life with equal parts spiritual guidance and financial pressure. Tithes claim 1/10 of your produce, ostensibly for God's work, though a good chunk lines the coffers of bishops living far more lavishly than you. Priests preach humility and obedience, urging you to accept your lot with grace, while gleaming church relics remind you whose side the wealth really favors. But faith is complicated. You sincerely believe in divine justice, saints' intercessions, and the protective power of relics. You might even make a pilgrimage to a nearby shrine, if you can spare the time and the sore feet. These journeys are more than spiritual, they're social events, breaking the monotony of village life. On a quirkier note, medieval villagers sometimes held mock courts called love days to settle minor disputes amicably. Think of it as early mediation with a side of beer. Instead of dragging neighbors to the Lord's court for petty squabbles, you'd try to resolve matters over shared drinks and maybe a song. Not every solution needs to involve fines. Your day is long, yet strangely rhythmic. The church bell marks time, prime, terce, sext, none. Though you don't own a clock and wouldn't want one if you did, you work by the sun, rising with dawn and resting at dusk. Candlelight is precious, saved for special occasions or deep winter nights when darkness creeps in early. And yet, amidst the drudgery, you carve out moments of humanity. A midday meal of coarse bread and onions becomes a small feast when shared with friends. The first green shoots of spring lift your spirits after a brutal winter. A newborn calf brings hope for the coming year. These small victories keep you going. Your children, if they survive infancy, are part of the workforce early. Boys help in the fields. Girls spin wool or assist with domestic chores. Education, when it happens, is rudimentary, usually limited to a few prayers and basic catechism. But practical skills matter more. Plowing, weaving, tending animals. These are the lessons that keep your family alive. Still, the Lord's shadow looms. His power isn't just economic, it's physical. Armed retainers enforce his will, and justice is rarely impartial. You've seen neighbors punished harshly for trivial offenses, their appeals falling on deaf ears. The fear is constant, but quietly endured. Despite it all, there's a surprising amount of humor. You joke about the Lord's girth, the priest's hypocrisy, the miller's sticky fingers. He always seems to miscount your grain. Humor is survival. A laugh shared after a long day in the fields is as nourishing as any meal. So, you trudge on, feet in the muck, back bent, but unbroken. You don't dream of castles or riches. You dream of a good harvest, a mild winter, a year without new taxes, modest hopes, but in your world, they're monumental. And as the seasons turn, you're learning that survival isn't about heroics. It's about persistence, cleverness, and knowing exactly how far you can bend before you break. The rhythm of the seasons shapes everything you do, but sometimes nature decides to throw you a curveball. Enter the twin terrors of medieval peasant life, famine and hunger. You don't need to be a scholar to know that when the crops fail, you're in trouble. The delicate balance of survival teeters, and suddenly that modest hope for a good harvest becomes the difference between life and debt ebb. In a good year, your fields yield enough grain, barley, rye, maybe some wheat if the soil's been kind. You stash it in your meager storage, careful to keep it safe from rats and damp. But one bad season, a few too many days of rain, an early frost, or a swarm of pests, and your granaries look hauntingly empty. Famine doesn't knock politely, it kicks the door in. Historians still argue whether the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 was the worst medieval peasants ever faced, but from your perspective, it's not a competition you want to be part of. 3 years of relentless rain rotted crops in the fields, drowned livestock in the muck, and turned fertile lands into stagnant swamps. Grain prices soared. People ate their seed grain, knowing it meant no planting for next year. Desperation doesn't ask for permission. In times like these, your diet becomes even grimmer. Forget meat, that's long gone. You're now scraping together a stew of nettles, weeds, and whatever root vegetables you can scavenge. Bread gets stretched with fillers like ground acorns or even sawdust. Tasty, right? It's not about flavor. It's about filling your belly with something, anything. One particularly grim but fascinating tidbit. In extreme famines, people made famine bread out of moss, bark, or even clay. These desperate measures often caused more harm than good, leading to severe digestive problems or even poisoning. But when the alternative is starvation, logic gets blurry, the community tries to help itself. You trade, you barter, you lean on neighbors. The village might organize gleaning days where everyone, especially women and children, comb the harvested fields for stray grains the reapers missed. Every kernel counts, and while charity is preached from the pulpit, in practice, it's the fellow peasants who share what little they have. You'd think the Lord might ease rents or reduce taxes during a famine. Spoiler alert, he doesn't. In fact, the demands often increase as he's under pressure from his own overlords. If you're lucky, he might allow delayed payments, but more often than not, you're expected to deliver your dues no matter how empty your fields are. Some lords do step up, providing grain loans or opening their stores, but these are the exceptions, not the rule. Of course, the church has its own approach. Days of fasting are called, processions organized, prayers and masses held to beg for divine intervention. Whether it's sin, demons, or displeased saints, the cause of famine is always spiritual in the eyes of the clergy. You, on the other hand, suspect it has more to do with the relentless rain that's been drowning your cabbage patch. Sometimes the famine becomes so severe that entire villages are abandoned. You might have heard whispers of settlements where no one remains, houses left to crumble into the earth. It's a haunting image, but one that looms over you with every poor harvest. Social tensions rise with empty stomachs. Petty theft becomes survival. You hear of grain riots in nearby towns where desperate people storm markets or ambush grain shipments. Violence simmers beneath the surface, held back only by the thin veneer of order enforced by manorial courts and church teachings. On a smaller scale, you might quietly extend your boundaries, maybe sneak into the Lord's woods to gather firewood or set a snare for a rabbit. Poaching is risky, but hunger is a louder master than fear. There's even an old saying among peasants, God made the deer for all men, but the Lord's fenced them in. One quirky belief you cling to is the idea of weather magic. Some folks whisper about cunning women or hedge wizards who can charm the clouds or ward off blight. Whether you believe it or not, when the rain won't stop and the grain turns to slime in the fields, a little magical insurance doesn't seem so foolish. As famine drags on, diseases follow. Malnutrition weakens your body, making you vulnerable to every cough, fever, and festering wound. Children and the elderly are hit hardest. Burial grounds fill up quietly, without the drama of a grand plague, but with just as much sorrow. The line between living and dying thins with every skipped meal. Despite this, there's a grim sort of ingenuity at play. You learn to ferment nettles into a passable soup. You stretch what little barley you have into thin, watery gruels. You discover that roasted turnip greens aren't half bad if you squint hard enough. Survival makes a chef of necessity. Historians debate whether famine ever truly united peasants against their lords, or if it simply deepened their dependence. Some argue that shared suffering fostered a collective identity, planting the seeds for future revolts. Others suggest it only entrenched the system, as desperation drove peasants to seek the protection, however begrudging, of their lords. In the long view, famine isn't a constant state. Eventually, the rains stop, the sun returns, and with a bit of luck, the next harvest brings relief. But you also know that famine is never far away. A single bad season can tip you back into scarcity. The cycle of feast and famine is as much a part of your life as the changing seasons. When the good years come, you don't waste them. You store grain more carefully, diversify your crops if you can, and maybe, just maybe, manage to fatten a pig for the next winter. You've learned not to take abundance for granted. But for now, as you chew slowly on a piece of coarse bread padded with ground-up chestnuts, you think of survival in simple terms. One more day, one more meal, one more season. And so, you carry on a little hungrier, a little leaner, but still here. The seasons keep turning, but fate has more trials in store. If famine gnaws at your belly, plagues aim straight for your lungs, your blood, your breath. Disease is an old companion in your world. You might think you're used to it, the coughs, the fevers, the strange swellings, but nothing prepares you for the plague years. They sweep through like an invisible army, sparing neither the righteous nor the sinful. You don't know the word bacteria, but you know the signs. First, a neighbor's child falls ill, then his mother. Before you can blink, half the village is coughing, shivering, or worse. Rumors of death in distant towns slither into your ears. They call it the great mortality, though you simply call it the sickness. You've seen sickness before, but not like this. The Black Death of 1347 to 1351, as historians later name it, is the stuff of nightmares. You live it in real time. Buboes, those grotesque, swollen lumps, erupt under arms and groins, behind knees. Flesh turns black, a sick parody of life. People die within days, sometimes hours. The fear is so thick, you can almost taste it. Still, historians argue whether the plague always presented this way. Some accounts mention pneumonic forms, where you cough up blood, infecting others with every breath. Others describe a septicemic version, killing silently, swiftly, with barely a warning. Whether it was one plague or several working in gruesome harmony remains a scholarly debate. But you don't need a university degree to know this. It kills fast. Panic spreads even faster. Families abandon the sick. Entire households die, leaving doors swinging open, hearths cold. The village bell tolls so often it might as well ring continuously. You watch the priest struggle to keep up with last rites, his prayers growing hoarse as the graveyard fills. Amidst the horror, odd beliefs take root. Some blame miasmas, bad air wafting from swamps, or decaying bodies. Others whisper about plague pits where evil festers. You hang sprigs of herbs around your neck, light pungent fires, and, if you're lucky, secure a handful of amber to ward off the sickness. Whether it works? Well, you're still standing. A particularly quirky tidbit: flagellants roam from village to village, whipping themselves in public processions. They believe suffering will earn God's mercy, lifting the plague. You watch in morbid fascination as these bloodied pilgrims pass through, chanting hymns between lashings. For a moment, you wonder if their pain buys you a few more safe days. But not all beliefs are so pious. Some point fingers. Foreigners, outsiders, even local minorities find themselves accused of poisoning wells or cursing the land. The fear needs a scapegoat, and superstition gives it a face. You hear of towns where violence erupts, where pogroms erupt as easily as fevers. Meanwhile, practical measures, what little you have, kick in. Villages quarantine themselves, blocking roads with carts and debris. Trade grinds to a halt. Markets fall silent. The absence of traveling merchants feels eerier than their songs ever did. Isolation becomes survival strategy number one. Yet the plague doesn't care about barricades. It slips through cracks in walls, hides in fleas, in rats, in the breath of loved ones. You might burn sweet-smelling resins, hang up garlands of garlic, but deep down, you know you're rolling dice with every sunrise. The social fabric tears in strange ways. With so many dead, labor becomes scarce. You notice the oddest thing. Lord suddenly needs you, feels life fallow without your hands. Rents are quietly reduced. wages, for those brave enough to demand them inch upward. For the first time, you glimpse a shift in power dynamics. Necessity makes strange bedfellows. Historians love to debate whether the Black Death was a hidden catalyst for the end of serfdom. Some argue it cracked feudalism's iron grip, giving peasants leverage through sheer scarcity. Others caution that the changes were uneven, slow, and fiercely resisted. In your reality, you're too busy surviving to care about grand theories. But you do notice the Lord's tone softening ever so slightly. There's also the question of spiritual reckoning. Death stalks your every moment. The church urges repentance, speaks of judgment, but you see priests die alongside sinners. What does that say about divine favor? Your faith bends, but does not break. You still pray, but perhaps a little more privately, a little less sure of heaven's fairness. Grave diggers become unexpected heroes. Their grim work keeps the village from sinking into a mire of decay. They wear simple masks, stuffed with herbs, not the beaked contraptions artists will later romanticize, but you admire their courage. Every grave dug is a quiet act of defiance. When the first wave passes, relief doesn't feel like victory. Survivors walk the village like ghosts, stunned by the sheer emptiness. You see fields with no farmers, cottages with no smoke rising. The silence screams louder than the bell ever did. Yet life, stubborn as ever, creeps back. Babies are born, crops are planted, the wheel turns again. You adapt, as you always do. One strange silver lining, with fewer mouths to feed, your share of resources increases. Land that once belonged to the dead becomes available. You might even negotiate slightly better terms with your lord. Not freedom, perhaps, but a little more breathing room. And with the memory of plague fresh, you and your fellow peasants cling tighter to community. You share stories of survival, exchange tips on herbal remedies, joke darkly, but with heart. Humor remains your sharpest blade against despair. As time passes, smaller outbreaks remind you the plague is never truly gone. It becomes a grim companion, returning every few decades. But you learn its patterns, its omens. You grow wary but not paralyzed. Through it all you endure, scarred perhaps, but alive. You've learned that survival isn't just about strength. It's about resilience, adaptation, and knowing when to bow to nature's fury and when to resist with every fiber of your being. And as you watch the sunset over newly tilled fields, you realize something simple but profound. You are still here, even as famine and plague stalk your steps. There's another shadow looming over your life, your Lord. He is not some faceless villain twirling his mustache. Those haven't even become fashionable yet. But his control is absolute. You are a peasant bound to his land, his taxes, his justice. Every sunrise, you're reminded that your survival depends not only on nature's whims, but also on your Lord's mood and his ever-hungry coffers. Your obligations are relentless. Rents, tithes, labor dues, you know them by heart. You owe him a portion of your grain, a share of your livestock, sometimes even your time. That's the corvée. Those tedious days when you drop your own plow to tend his fields, as if your meager acre isn't crying out for attention. You sigh, shoulder your tools, and trudge off, because refusing isn't really an option. Historians still argue whether medieval lords were cruel taskmasters or just cogs in the bigger feudal machine, trapped by obligations to their own superiors. Some lords, it's true, managed their estates with a lighter touch. but others squeeze every drop from their peasants, treating your labor like an inexhaustible resource. When times are good, you manage. When times are bad, when the harvest fails, when disease thins the village, you might pray for leniency. Sometimes you get it. A kind-hearted steward might offer delayed payments or forgive small debts. But often, the demands keep coming. After all, your Lord has his own obligations to his overlord, to the king, and perhaps most importantly, to his own sense of pride. You've heard of villenage, that legal bondage tying peasants to the land. You live it daily, want to marry someone from another manor. It's a fine. Wish to send your son to town to learn a trade? Another fee. It's as if every life decision comes with a price tag, payable in coin or kind. And since coin is scarce, you usually pay in bushels, eggs, or hard-won labor. And yet, within this suffocating system, you find small freedoms. Custom is your quiet ally. Lords can't simply invent new obligations without facing resistance, or at least some serious grumbling. Manorial courts, presided over by the lord or his steward, handle disputes, enforce fines, and keep the social order intact. You might even use these courts to air your own grievances, though justice tends to lean heavily in favor of the manor. Still, the court's records are a gold mine of quirky tidbits. You've seen neighbors fined for brewing unlicensed ale, as if the manor's brew could satisfy everyone, or for letting their pigs run wild through the Lord's gardens. You chuckle, remembering old Tom fined for insulting the reeve with impolite gestures, an offense paid with a hen. Occasionally, the social order wobbles. Rumors of uprisings drift from distant shires. You hear tales of peasants refusing their dues, even of violent confrontations. Most of the time, these sparks are swiftly extinguished, but they leave an impression. You tuck them away, a quiet reminder that not all chains are unbreakable. Your relationship with your Lord is complex. On feast days, he might host a generous spread, sharing roasted meats, fresh bread, and spiced wine. For a moment, the gap between you feels narrower. He depends on you, after all. Without your toil, his fields would yield nothing. His barns would stand empty. It's a delicate balance. His power over you is real, but so is his reliance. One particularly strange medieval practice, the merchet, a fee paid by a peasant father to the Lord when his daughter marries. Some say it's compensation for the loss of her labor. Others whisper darker origins, linking it to ancient rights claimed by lords. Historians bicker over its true meaning, but you just see it as another way to lighten your already thin purse. Taxation doesn't stop at the manor gate. Royal demands trickle down. You remember the infamous poll tax of 1381, how it sparked the great peasants' revolt. The king's collectors came knocking, counting heads, demanding payment regardless of wealth. That particular straw broke many backs. You've heard the names of rebels like Wat Tyler whispered with a mix of admiration and fear. Yet, most days, rebellion is a distant dream. You have mouths to feed, fields to tend, roofs to patch. Resistance often comes in smaller forms, dragging your feet on corvée days, accidentally underreporting your grain yield, or simply muttering under your breath as you hand over yet another tithe. Interestingly, some lords embrace reforms. In regions where labor is scarce post-plague, they start offering wages instead of forced labor. Suddenly, you're not just a villain, you're a worker with a little bargaining power. It's a slow shift, uneven and fragile, but it hints at changes brewing beneath the surface. The church, too, plays its part in this power web. You owe them tithes, but they also provide spiritual protection and sometimes practical charity. Monasteries might offer alms, hospitals, or shelter. The parish priest is both your confessor and your occasional advocate, though his loyalties often lie with the landowning class. Despite everything, you carve out moments of joy. Village fairs, holy days, weddings, brief respites where the weight of obligations lifts, if only for an afternoon. You dance, you feast, you laugh at bawdy songs sung by wandering minstrels. In these moments, you are not just a peasant. You are part of a living, breathing community, and through it all you endure. The Lord's demands may bend your back, but they do not break your spirit. You've learned to navigate the currents of feudal life with quiet cunning, leaning on tradition, community, and a healthy dose of stubbornness. As you watch the manor loom against the setting sun, you don't see just oppression. You see the battleground of survival, where power is real, but resilience is greater. Day after day, you face the fields, the taxes, the lords. But what about when nature itself decides to throw something new at you? Climate is a fickle master, and during your life as a medieval peasant, it begins to change in ways no one quite understands. You know the rhythms of the seasons by heart, but suddenly those old patterns betray you. Historians call it the onset of the Little Ice Age. You just call it a bad year. Then another, and another. The summers grow cooler, wetter. The winters stretch longer, biting deeper. Crops you once took for granted, wheat, barley, rye, fail under unseasonal frosts or drown in relentless rains. You look up at a sky that's always too gray, always too heavy. There's no weather forecast to warn you. You read the signs in the color of the clouds, the chatter of birds, the feel of the earth under your bare feet. But even the elders, with their sayings and superstitions, can't explain why the seasons have turned traitor. Some mutter of heavenly displeasure, others blame witches or distant wars or even comets streaking ominously overhead. In truth, you don't need to know the cause to feel the consequences. Failed harvests mean empty granaries. You stretch your stores thinner and thinner. Bread is made from whatever you can scavenge. Peas, beans, acorns, even ground-up tree bark. If it comes to that, you chew, you swallow, you survive. Taste becomes a luxury. One quirky practice reemerges during these hungry years: the use of famine breads. Recipes pass through whispered conversations, mixing sawdust into dough, bulking it with weeds like goosefoot and nettle. They fill your belly even if they scratch your throat on the way down. You smile wryly, thinking of how future generations might romanticize rustic medieval recipes. If only they knew. Malnutrition leaves its mark. You see it in the children: stunted growth, swollen bellies, brittle hair. In adults, it's the quiet exhaustion that settles in your bones, the kind of weariness sleep can't cure. Simple infections become deadly when your body has no strength left to fight, and yet life finds a way. You adapt. Diversification becomes your silent strategy. Where once you relied heavily on grain, now you tend more vegetables, raise hardier livestock. Goats become precious. They're less fussy than cows, more resistant to bad forage. Pigs, those walking compost bins, thrive on scraps and weeds. Every egg, every drop of milk becomes a victory. Communal support tightens. You share what little you have, barter with neighbors, help repair a collapsed roof, lend a hand during haymaking. The village becomes a lifeboat in a stormy sea. Isolation, you learn, is a recipe for failure. Yet even your best efforts sometimes aren't enough. Starvation does not announce itself loudly. It creeps in quietly. One day, you notice fewer people at the market. Another day, the bell tolls for an entire family. You wonder if your turn is next. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 stands as a grim monument in your memory. 3 years of near-continuous rain, crop failures, and livestock diseases. You lived through it. Barely. Historians debate whether its true impact is fully understood, even suggesting that cannibalism, though taboo, might have occurred in isolated pockets. You never saw it yourself, but you remember the whispered stories. You don't ask too many questions. The famine also exposes how fragile the Lord's power really is. A starving peasant is a useless worker. Some lords, facing their own dwindling supplies, loosen their grip temporarily. Others double down, hoarding resources, sparking resentment that simmers dangerously close to rebellion. Curiously, nature's cruelty fosters unexpected innovations. You see the rise of new field systems, better drainage techniques, more efficient plows. Necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention. Whether these are born from desperate peasants or pragmatic landlords, you hardly care. Anything that promises a more reliable harvest earns your gratitude. You also notice the shift in mindset. Where once you prayed for abundance, you now pray simply for enough. Enough to survive, enough to plant again, enough to keep the children alive through winter. Moderation becomes your unspoken creed. Religious interpretations of these hard years vary wildly. Some clergy preach repentance, calling these hardships divine punishment for sins both imagined and real. Others, with gentler hearts, see the suffering of the innocent and urge charity, compassion. The divide within the church mirrors your own internal struggle. Is this suffering a test, or simply the price of existing in a harsh, indifferent world? Festivals, surprisingly, do not disappear in these grim times. If anything, they become more important. A harvest festival might be meager, but it's still a celebration of survival. You find joy in small things, a shared cup of ale, a well-told joke, the first green shoots in a spring field. Historians still argue whether the Little Ice Age's impact on peasant life has been exaggerated. Some claim local variations meant certain regions were barely affected, while others suffered greatly. From where you stand, squelching through mud-soaked fields, there's no exaggeration needed. The cold is real. The hunger is real. The resilience, however, is yours. Another peculiar detail. You start keeping bees, more for their wax than their honey. Candles become precious during long, dark winters, and the soft glow of a beeswax taper feels like a small rebellion against the encroaching cold. Light, you find, is as vital as food for lifting the spirit. Through cycles of scarcity and adaptation, you develop a quiet wisdom. You learn to read the land more keenly, to prepare for lean years even when the barns are full. It's a hard-earned knowledge passed from parent to child, etched into every calloused hand and weathered face. Despite the hardships, you notice something curious about yourself. You're not just surviving, you're learning. Each failed harvest teaches you something new. Each winter endured sharpens your instincts. You are becoming, in your own way, a master of survival. And as you gaze out over fields that refuse to give up their bounty easily, you realize a simple truth. Nature may be indifferent, but you are not. You fight for your place in this world with every seed planted, every loaf baked, every breath drawn against the biting wind. You endure, because that's what peasants do. Even as the cold bites and famine gnaws, you discover that life isn't only about toiling in the fields or dodging taxes, it's also about the web of human connections that keep you afloat. In your medieval village, community is not some vague feel-good concept. It's survival itself. You live cheek by jowl with your neighbors. Privacy is a luxury no one can afford. Your cottage walls are thin, the gaps between houses thinner. Every cough, every argument, every stolen kiss, it's all public knowledge within minutes. Gossip flows faster than the river after spring rains. Sometimes it's annoying, but mostly it's your social glue. Social gatherings are your respite. Sunday Mass is as much a village meeting as it is a religious duty. You exchange news, arrange trades, and occasionally settle old scores with a subtle jab of words, or the less subtle whack of a stick behind the church. Historians still debate whether these churchyard scuffles were tolerated traditions or frowned upon nuisances, but you know they serve a purpose, airing grievances without burning down relationships. Beyond the church, you have your alehouse, a smoky, boisterous haven where villagers unwind after long days. Here, the beer is thick, the benches hard, and the stories even harder to believe. You've heard tales of devilish black dogs haunting crossroads, of fairies stealing infants, of will-o'-the-wisps luring drunks into marshes. You smile, sip your drink, and add your own embroidered tales to the mix. One quirky tradition you cherish is the beating of the bounds. Once a year, you and your neighbors walk the perimeter of the parish, whacking landmarks with sticks to mark the boundaries in memory. Children are sometimes bumped against trees or even rolled in ditches, supposedly to imprint the borders firmly in their young minds. It's absurd. It's hilarious. It's community in action. Marriages, too, are communal affairs. You don't just marry a person. You marry their family, their land, their obligations. Dowries are negotiated, alliances formed. And when the big day comes, it's a rare moment of joy for the whole village. There's dancing, feasting, ribald songs that would make a monk blush. You dance not just for the couple, but for the promise of life continuing despite hardship. You also rely on informal networks of aid. If a barn burns down, the village comes together for a helping day to rebuild it. If a widow struggles to harvest her meager plot, hands appear to gather her grain. There's no formal charity, just the understanding that next time it might be you in need. Historians argue over how much genuine solidarity existed among medieval peasants. Some claim that competition for scarce resources bred constant friction. Others highlight the cooperative structures that persisted despite poverty. From your vantage point, it's both. Rivalries simmer, but when crisis strikes, grudges are set aside for now. Fairs and markets offer you a glimpse of a wider world. These are not everyday events, but when they come, they transform your routine. You see traders hawking spices from far-off lands, entertainers juggling knives or walking tightropes, and even quack doctors selling dubious potions. You might sell a few eggs, buy a new pot, or simply lose yourself in the crowd's hum. Seasonal cycles also dictate communal life. You measure time not by months, but by the feast of St. Michael, the Yuletide, Lent, and Lammas. Each brings its own customs, its own flavors. Lent with its austere fasting, is a lean period, but also an excuse for inventive cooking. You've tasted Lenten fish made from almond paste and laughed at the absurdity of it. Of course, not everything is idyllic. Crime exists, petty theft, poaching, even occasional violence. You remember when young Will was caught snaring rabbits in the Lord's woods? The manorial court fined him harshly, but the village passed around a few loaves to help his family through the fine. Justice is a complicated dance. Superstition, too, weaves through daily life. The village has its wise woman, keeper of herbal remedies and whispered charms. Whether you truly believe she can cure a fever with foxglove or ward off evil spirits with rowan twigs doesn't matter. In desperate times, a pinch of hope is worth more than skepticism. One peculiar belief you cling to is the idea of elf shot, tiny, invisible arrows fired by malicious fairies causing sudden pains in livestock or humans. You've seen neighbors hang iron charms over their doors, swear by the protective power of salt lines. Modern minds might scoff, but when your best milk cow falls ill, you'll take all the protection you can get. Disputes are inevitable. Boundaries blur, tempers flare, and sometimes conflict escalate to blood feuds. But for the most part, you've learned to navigate these tensions with careful words, mutual favors, and the ever-useful intervention of the village elders. Their wrinkled faces and sharp tongues are your first line of conflict resolution. Communal justice also involves rituals of public shaming. The stocks in the village square are a familiar sight. You remember when Joan was locked in for selling watered-down ale. For a day she sat while neighbors jeered, yet by evening she was sharing a laugh with the very people who mocked her. Shame, like most things in your village, is temporary. One of the strangest customs you've witnessed is rough music. When a man mistreats his wife or violates communal norms, the village might gather to serenade him with pots, pans, and cacophonous noise. The mockery is as much a punishment as any fine, serving as a reminder that no one, no matter how surly, stands above communal values. As harsh as life can be, you find that these communal rituals, gatherings, and even disputes give structure to your existence. They remind you that you are not alone. Your village breathes with a shared rhythm, one heart, many hands. You don't have a written code of conduct, but you live by an unspoken rule: help when you can, endure when you must, and never let pride blind you to the needs of others. In this way, your community becomes your true fortress, not stone walls, but bonds of mutual dependence. And so, as you walk back from a long day's work, passing familiar faces, trading idle gossip, you feel a quiet reassurance. The lords may tax you, the weather may betray you, but here, in the tangle of village life, you find your place. It is messy, it is imperfect, but it is home. As much as you rely on your village, you are never far from the shadow of the Lord's manor. His power looms large, not just in taxes and duties, but in every facet of your life. You don't own your land, not truly. You hold it at the Lord's pleasure, which means he can squeeze you tighter whenever he feels the pinch. The manor court is where you see his power in action. It's not some grand, distant courtroom. It's a gathering of villagers, held beneath a spreading tree or in a drafty hall, where disputes are heard, fines are levied, and customs are enforced. You stand there with your cap in hand, heart thumping as the steward, his voice flat, his ledger fat, recites your name for a missing day of labor. 2 pence fine, he declares. You grimace, but what choice do you have? You pay, knowing full well the Lord's granaries are full from your back's labor. Historians still argue whether these courts offer genuine justice or simply reinforce the Lord's grip. From where you stand, it's a little of both. Yes, the Lord benefits, but it's also the place where disputes over grazing rights, broken fences, or stolen chickens get settled. Without it, the village might descend into chaos. One quirky duty you loathe is the boon work. These are the gift days of extra labor owed to the Lord, especially during harvest. They're dressed up as community events, helping out the manor, but everyone knows they're unpaid toil. Still, you grit your teeth, swing your sickle, and steal what satisfaction you can from working alongside your neighbors. And then there's the Harriet, the grim tax of death. When a villager dies, the Lord claims the best beast or possession from the estate. You've seen families watch in silent anger as their finest ox is led away, a final insult to grief. It's customary, it's legal, but that doesn't make it right. Tithes to the church are another layer of burden, 1/10 of your produce straight to God, or more accurately, to the priest and his abbey. You've wondered late at night how much of your barley ends up in monastic ale. Still, you comply. Better to stay in God's good graces, or at least the priest's. Taxes are rarely just about money. Sometimes you're called to build roads, repair bridges, or dig ditches. Public works, they call them. You call them unpaid labor, yet you understand their necessity. When the bridge collapses, no merchant reaches the market, and no market means no coin in anyone's pocket. One peculiar obligation is the merchant, a fine paid by a father to the Lord upon his daughter's marriage. Essentially, you pay for the privilege of seeing your child wed. It rankles, but you tell yourself it's tradition. Some lords, in a fit of magnanimity, waive the fee. Most do not. Lords also wield the dreaded forest law. You've lost count of how many times you've been warned against poaching in the Lord's woods. Even gathering fallen branches for firewood can earn a hefty fine. Yet, on bitter winter nights, you weigh the risk. Better to risk a fine than freeze. Historians debate how actively these laws were enforced. Some lords turned a blind eye to small transgressions. Others relished hunting down offenders. You've learned to tread lightly. Keep your head down and remember which foresters are lenient and which relish their cudgels a little too much. Yet, for all his power, the Lord is not invincible. His fortunes rise and fall with the land. Bad harvests pinch him too. You've seen once proud knights reduced to demanding gifts from their tenants to fund a new war or pay off debts. You hide your smile when his steward's voice grows just a little too desperate. One curious wrinkle in your relationship with the manor is the gleaning right. After the Lord's harvest, you're allowed to scavenge the fields for leftover grain. It's back-breaking work, but those stray ears of wheat can mean the difference between hunger and survival. You relish this small sanctioned defiance, picking the fields clean after the Lord's wagons have rolled away. Feudal obligations aren't static. Over time, you notice a slow, grinding shift. As coin becomes more common, some lords offer to commute labor services into money rents. It's tempting. Pay a fixed sum instead of endless days in the Lord's fields, but money is hard to come by, and the sums are steep. Still, it's a glimmer of change. Rebellions, though rare, are not unheard of. You've heard of the peasants' revolt in distant land where serfs took up arms, demanding fairer treatment. Historians still argue whether such uprisings were driven by ideological zeal or sheer desperation. You suspect it's both. In your heart, you understand the fury, but you also know the price of failure. Yet, amidst all this, there are moments when the Lord's interests align with yours. Defense is one such moment. When bandits roam or foreign invaders threaten, the Lord organizes militias, fortifies boundaries. You may grumble about His taxes, but when danger looms, His resources become your shield. Feasts and festivals sometimes see the Lord playing the generous patron. On certain holy days, He might distribute bread, ale, or even meat. You're not fooled. It's calculated goodwill, but you don't refuse a free meal. Besides, these moments soften the hard edges of lordship, if only briefly. One unexpected perk of manorial life is the mill. Technically, you're required to use the Lord's mill to grind your grain, for a fee, of course, but it's also a social hub where news is exchanged, bargains struck, and clandestine romances bloom. You hate the toll, but you appreciate the gossip. In rare cases, a clever peasant might rise within this rigid structure. You've heard tales of serfs who, through hard work, shrewd marriages, and a bit of luck, purchased their freedom or rise to the status of yeoman. It's a long shot, but it keeps the spark of ambition alive. Ultimately, the manor is both your cage and your lifeline. You resent its demands, yet recognize its role in maintaining the fragile balance of medieval life. The Lord's hand is heavy, but it shields as much as it strikes. And as you bend your back to the plow, fulfilling yet another duty, you remind yourself, power is never permanent. The wheel turns, seasons change, even lords grow old. You endure, because you must. As you toil beneath the ever-watchful eyes of your Lord and navigate the tangled web of village life, a new invisible enemy seeps through the land. Plague. You don't know it by names like Yersinia pestis or Black Death. You simply call it pestilence. And when it comes like a whispered curse, first a rumor, then a cough, then a village emptied. You remember the first signs well. A merchant's cart rattling in with less cheer, more whispers. Talk of strange swellings, of sudden deaths in distant towns. Historians still argue whether people understood contagion in a modern sense, but you know this much. When the sickness arrives, people vanish fast. There's no heroic defense. The plague doesn't knock, it bursts in. Neighbors who smiled at you yesterday are shrouded in blankets today, their bodies marked with angry dark buboes. The village bell tolls far too often. You try not to count. In your world, sickness is not just physical, but spiritual. You suspect divine punishment, maybe for some long-forgotten sin. The church urges you to pray harder, fast more, repent. Processions wind through the streets, barefoot penitents flagellating themselves in public displays of humility. You wonder if God truly needs so much noise to notice your suffering. Yet not everyone accepts the church's explanation. Whispers circulate about foul airs, miasmas rising from swamps, stirred by witches or sent by foreign enemies. You've seen villagers carry posies of herbs, convinced the sweet scent will shield them. Frankly, you'd rather breathe through rosemary than the stench of rotting bodies. One peculiar defense you witness is the plague doctor in his bird-like mask, stuffed with aromatic herbs. He looks more like a ghoul than a healer, but desperate times breed strange sights. You've heard that the beak is meant to filter out deadly vapors. Whether it works is another matter. When plague strikes, life fractures, markets shutter, fields go unplowed, manorial obligations are quietly ignored. Even the lords retreat to their fortified manors, leaving you to fend for yourselves. Ironically, the disease is the great equalizer. Rich and poor, priest and peasant, all fall alike. You and your family do what you can. You avoid gatherings, cleanse your home with vinegar, hang charms of rowan and hawthorn. The village well is a source of both life and fear. You've seen families draw water under the cover of dawn, hoping to avoid cursed droplets. One fringe belief you find both disturbing and fascinating is the notion of plague stones. These are hollowed rocks where villagers place coins doused in vinegar, hoping to trade for food without direct contact. It's a clumsy form of quarantine commerce, but in desperate times, even vinegar-soaked silver feels safer. You've also heard of entire villages walling themselves in, refusing travelers, hoping to outlast the plague's reach. Some succeed, others starve. It's a gamble either way. The grim procession of death reshapes daily life. The grave diggers, once overlooked laborers, become morbid celebrities, their numbers dwindling with each passing week. Graves are dug deeper, stacked with layers of the fallen. You've helped bury friends, their faces half remembered beneath the soil. There's no ceremony, just the raw mechanical need to keep up with the dead. Yet, amidst the horror, peculiar acts of kindness surface. Families adopt orphaned children, strangers share their meager stores. You've seen neighbors risk their lives to tend to the sick, driven by duty or sheer stubborn compassion. These small mercies are fleeting lights in a dark time. Historians debate whether such moments reflect true solidarity or simple necessity. You believe it's both. When the world feels like it's ending, even a shared loaf of bread becomes a rebellion against despair. Survival becomes an act of constant negotiation. You barter whatever you can, eggs, cloth, labor, for essentials. Money loses its luster when the baker's oven is cold and the brewer's casks are empty. The old rules blur. You've seen once proud tenants bargain like beggars, and beggars suddenly command respect if they hold a sack of grain. Ironically, in the wake of plague, the scarcity of labor gives you leverage. Fields lie fallow, lords grow desperate for hands to till the soil. You find yourself in a rare position to negotiate better terms, less service, more freedom. It's a quiet, begrudging empowerment, one you grasp with both hands. You notice subtle shifts. Some manorial obligations are commuted to rent. Serfs speak more boldly. The social order, though not overturned, is undeniably shaken. Change creeps in, not through grand revolutions, but through the simple fact that so many are gone. One odd superstition you can't shake is the belief that cats carry the plague. In some places, mass killings of felines are ordered, believed to rid the village of evil spirits. You know better. Fewer cats mean more rats, and more rats mean more fleas. Still, in times of fear, logic takes a back seat to panic. Isolation becomes both refuge and a prison. You find solace in the rhythms of solitary tasks, mending nets, tending small gardens, carving simple tools. The quiet is unnerving at first, but soon it becomes a shield against the chaos beyond your threshold. When the worst of the plague passes, the village feels like a ghost of itself. Empty cottages, overgrown paths, silent mills. Yet life, stubborn as thistles, pushes through. You hear laughter again, tentative and raw. The fields call as they always do. You plant, you harvest, you rebuild. The scars remain, both on the land and in your heart, but you endure because you must. You've learned that survival is not just about avoiding death, but about reclaiming life after it. In the end, the plague teaches you a bitter truth. Everything is fragile, but nothing is permanent. Lords fall, priests die, but so do peasants. Yet, for those who remain, there is always the next morning, the next sowing, the next song shared by the fire. And in that small, stubborn hope, you find your strength. After the plague, you watch as life begins to crawl back into your village, but it's different now. The air feels thicker, the land more still. People are quieter, more watchful. There's no going back to the way things were. The death toll is too high, and what's left is a landscape forever marked by loss. It's not just the departed, it's the empty fields, the hollowed-out homes, the slow rebuild of everything that was taken so quickly. Yet, you must keep going. The world didn't pause for grief, and neither can you. The farm needs tending, the animals need feeding, the fields need sowing. Your hands are steady as you work, but your mind is often elsewhere, lost in the weight of the lost. The lords, too, seem changed. At first, they retreat into their estates, fearful, counting their own dead, their fortunes drained by the chaos. But over time, they reemerge, as if reborn from their own kind of plague, the plague of necessity. The feudal order, still standing, needs to adapt. The Lord needs workers more than he ever did before. His arrogance, though still present, is tempered by an unspoken recognition. He can't do it alone. Historians argue whether the plague truly weakened feudalism or just rearranged it. The answers lie in small shifts, small concessions, like lords agreeing to rent instead of forcing labor. It's a subtle transformation, but you feel it. For the first time in your life, you're able to ask for something more than the scraps left from the Lord's table. Sometimes you get it. As the soil begins to yield again, so too does your will to push forward. The village comes back to life in unexpected ways. The church, once a place of fear and guilt, now offers something more, a way to honor the dead, to find solace in the shared pain. The priest, weary and haggard, still delivers his mass, but you notice his words have changed. They speak more of survival, less of sin. New traditions are born from the plague's aftermath. For every death, there is a feast for the living, a celebration of survival. The bones of those lost are quietly buried, but the community looks ahead now, wary but determined. These rituals of remembrance are strange comforts. You find yourself clinging to them, just as you cling to the land beneath your feet. In the quieter moments, you can still hear the echoes of the lost ones. They haunt the village in subtle ways. The coldness in the air when you walk by the old mill, the soft breeze through the empty windows of a house that once had children's laughter. But you don't mourn for them every day anymore. The grief is a shadow now, a constant companion, but one that doesn't rule your every breath. You learn to live with it, as you live with everything else that is hard and unyielding. There's a new kind of camaraderie in the air, too. The villagers have been through something so unimaginable together that it binds you all in ways words cannot explain. Neighbors help each other rebuild homes, share whatever meager food they can, and slowly, reluctantly, trust each other again. You've seen firsthand how quickly trust can be shattered by disease, how fear can turn friend into foe. But now there's a tentative rebuilding of that trust, step by careful step. As you help rebuild the stone walls of a neighbor's cottage, you can't help but wonder if something permanent has changed. The work itself is no different than it was before the plague, yet the very act of it feels more urgent, as though each stone you lay in place is a small act of defiance against the silence of the grave. You're building a future now, not just filling the gaps left behind. And it's hard, lonely work. But you're not alone anymore. The Lord, though still distant, has shifted his focus. Where once he was the ever-present overseer, now he's more like a distant uncle, occasionally helpful, but with its own concerns. You've heard murmurs of how many manors fell during the plague, how many lords lost everything. His own fortune, though stable, is no longer something to be taken for granted. The land is thinner, and he can't afford to take his peasants for granted either. You hear less about his hunts, his grand feasts, and more about his need for workers, his desperation for produce. Perhaps you've never seen him sweat before, but you see it now. But that's not your concern. Your concern is food. Food that doesn't come easily after the plague. The land is slow to recover. Even the most faithful plowing feels like it's not enough. You've seen fields that should have yielded good crops this year empty, cracked soil, unable to catch rain. But you press on. It's all you can do. You've become accustomed to the quiet of these years, to the soft murmur of life after tragedy. Perhaps this is the price of survival, learning to live with what you have, not what you've lost. It's a quiet victory, one you never celebrate, but that doesn't make it any less real. You endure as always. In moments of rare peace, you think about what you've learned in these years. The plague was terrible, yes, but it revealed something about the land, about the world, that it doesn't stop, not even for death. The seasons change, the years pass, and while you've lost much, you've also gained a kind of fortitude, a resilience forged from pain and loss. The soil you've worked, the people you've helped, the life you've held on to, these things matter now, more than they ever did before. And as you watch the sun rise over your small farm, you know that no matter what comes next, you'll meet it with that same quiet strength. As the years pass, the village slowly, almost imperceptibly, starts to heal. The scars of the plague are still there, etched into the landscape, but life, stubborn as ever, refuses to be extinguished. The sounds of children's laughter begin to fill the streets again, though quieter, more cautious than before. It's as if the very air holds its breath, waiting for the next calamity to strike. But for now, the earth is yielding, and your world, small and hard-won, seems to stretch on. The land, though slow to recover, has a rhythm to it. Each day feels like a quiet victory, a reaffirmation of your place in the world. You've learned to listen to the soil beneath your feet, to understand the subtle shifts in the seasons, the way the winds change with the coming of autumn. It's a language older than you, and yet it's one you've slowly come to understand in your own way. You plant and you sow, you reap and you harvest. It's a cycle that gives meaning to the passing of time, no matter how much you may wish it would speed up. In this new, quieter world, you've found a strange comfort in routine. The work is still hard, the days still long, but there's something steadying about the predictability of it all. The rhythms of life feel less like a burden and more like a companion. You wake with the sun, work the fields, gather with your neighbors, and rest beneath the stars. The simplicity of it, the unspoken camaraderie that has formed in the wake of so much tragedy, feels like a balm to your weary soul. The Lord, too, has shifted. Once a distant figure of unchecked power, he now seems almost human in his vulnerabilities. He's not the towering figure he once was, standing at the top of the social hierarchy. Instead, he's more like a man desperately trying to hold on to something he doesn't fully understand. You see him less frequently, but when you do, his face is drawn, his movements slower, as if the weight of the world presses down on him in a way it didn't before. He's lost much, and though he still holds power over you, it's a power that seems less certain, less assured. Historians debate the exact impact of the plague on the feudal system, whether it brought about a permanent shift in the balance of power, or if things merely returned to their old ways after a brief period of upheaval. You don't know the answer, but you do know this. Things are different now. There's a quiet space where there once was tension. You're not sure if it's the weariness of survival or the slow erosion of old ways, but there's a new, unspoken understanding between you and the Lord. The days of feudal oppression, though still present, seem less sharp now, less tyrannical. One strange aspect of this post-plague world is the shifting role of the church. Priest, once a pillar of authority, now seems almost as lost as the Lord. The sermons are quieter, the masses less fervent. People no longer come to church out of fear of divine wrath. They come to honor the dead and search for meaning in a world that has turned upside down. The church still plays a central role in your life, but it's no longer the unquestioned authority it once was. You see more villagers turning inward, searching for their own ways to cope with the aftermath, whether through personal rituals or through the quiet contemplation of the seasons. In a strange way, the plague has shifted the landscape of faith itself. People are no longer as willing to accept what they're told. They question more. They search for deeper meaning in the simplest things. You've heard murmurs of new beliefs, ones that don't fit neatly within the boundaries of the church. Some speak of strange signs in the sky. Others talk of visions in their dreams. There's talk of the stars, the moon, and the very earth itself holding hidden truths. It's an unsettling, even dangerous notion in a world where heresy is a crime. But it's also a quiet rebellion against the unbending certainties of the past. In this new, uncertain world, people are searching for something beyond the old ways. One peculiar trend that's emerged in your village is the revival of ancient rituals. Things long forgotten, old ways of planting, healing, and honoring the spirits of the land are being resurrected, albeit in whispers. You've seen small offerings left at the edges of the forest, near streams, places once thought sacred, but now largely ignored. It's an odd mixture of old superstition and desperate hope, a way of reaching out to a world that's been torn apart. You've taken part in a few of these quiet ceremonies, feeling a strange comfort in the connection to the earth and to the past. There's a power in those rituals, a power that doesn't come from the church or the Lord. It comes from something older, deeper, and more personal. As life continues, you begin to notice something else. The land is beginning to change. It's subtle at first. The crops seem to grow a little slower. the trees a little more twisted. But it's there, if you know where to look. The earth has been scarred by the plague, and though it may recover, it will never be the same. There's a shift in the air, a heaviness that hangs over the village, as if the land itself is still mourning the loss of so many. You've seen the way the seasons don't quite match up, how the frost lingers longer into the spring, or how the harvest comes late. It's as though the land itself is still reeling from the shock. Yet, in this quiet morning, there's life. The birds return, the animals begin to thrive once more, and your own farm, though slow to heal, starts to show signs of life. It's not the grand rebirth you might have hoped for, but it's enough. It's more than enough. Survival, you've learned, is not about returning to what was. It's about finding a way to move forward, one step at a time. It's about living with what you have, making the best of the small victories, and carrying on despite everything that's been lost. You've seen firsthand how fragile life is, how quickly things can be taken from you, but you've also seen the quiet power of resilience, the way the earth heals, the way people endure, and the way life, in all its forms, finds a way to keep going. And in that, you find something sacred, something worth holding on to. By now, the years have worn into something like routine. The weight of the plague and its aftermath still lingers, but it no longer feels as suffocating. The village has healed, slowly, its scars worn smooth by time and necessity. You've adjusted to a new normal, one marked by caution, but also by an unexpected sense of hope. Life has returned in fits and starts, and in its own way, it's good. Better than you dared hope when the first signs of plague ravaged your village. The Lord, though still aloof and distant, seems to have accepted the new order, even if only begrudgingly. You've noticed his manner has grown quieter, his grandiose pursuits less frequent. He still demands his share of crops and labor, but there's less of the old cruelty in his dealings. He's lost much, but in some strange way so have you, and it seems to have leveled the playing field between lord and peasant, if only a little. You've heard of some villages where the lords grew even more oppressive after the plague, tightening their grip on their surviving subjects in an effort to recoup their losses. But here, in your village, things feel different. You've seen the way the peasants stand a little taller, how conversations in the marketplace are more open, more daring. It's as though the plague cracked the old structure open just a little, and now there's room for new ideas, new ways of living. Not everything has changed, but enough has shifted that you can feel it. The Lord is not the only one who seems different. The church, too, has undergone a quiet transformation. No longer the absolute power it once was, the clergy seem more human, more frail. The priest, once a figure of unquestioned authority, has become something of a confidant for many. His sermons are still full of God's wrath, but now there's a thread of understanding woven through them, a recognition of the suffering that has touched everyone, even the church itself. You've seen the priest spend long hours in quiet conversation with the villagers, offering counsel not just on matters of the soul, but on practical matters too. How to handle a bad harvest, how to mend a broken cart. It's a strange shift, but one you've come to appreciate. In a world that has lost so much, even the church's small moments of humanity feel like a raw kind of grace. Still, There are those who can't let go of the old ways. The superstitions linger, stubborn as ever. You've heard whispers of witches in the forest, of old rites being practiced under the cover of night. People still leave offerings at the edge of the woods, small trinkets and herbs, hoping to appease the spirits that linger. You're not sure what to make of it, but part of you doesn't want to know. In a world that has seen so much death and destruction, a little belief in something greater than yourself can be a comfort, even if it's only a small one. And then there's the land. It has not forgotten the plague, and neither have you. The earth, while healing, still bears the marks of what it endured. Some crops grow strong, others falter. The trees, once tall and proud, seem to have bent under the weight of the past. The land is slower now, quieter. It's as though it, too, is waiting for something, anything, to shake off the shadows of the past. You've noticed the changes, how the seasons seem slightly off, how the frost lingers longer into the spring, or how the harvest comes later than expected. It's as if the land itself has a memory of what was taken from it. Yet despite these imperfections, you find solace in it. The land is stubborn. It survives. It adapts. And so do you. The crops you've sown in the past few years are beginning to yield, if only just enough to get by. It's not a bounty, but it's enough to keep you going, enough to make you feel like there's hope, however small. You think about the future, though you don't dare to hope too much. The world outside your small village is a place of uncertainty, of rumors of more wars, more plagues, more uncertainty. But inside your world, the rhythm of life continues. The sun rises and sets, the crops grow, albeit slowly, and the seasons continue their eternal cycle. Perhaps that's all you can ask for now, small victories in a world that has known so much loss. The village itself is no longer the place it once was. It's quieter, less bustling than before. The market is smaller, the sounds of children's laughter less frequent. Some of the houses are still abandoned, their doors and windows boarded up, a silent testament to the many who didn't survive. But there's life here too, and it's worth holding on to. In the evenings, when the sun begins to dip below the horizon and the village falls into a soft twilight, you can hear the quiet murmur of conversation, the rustle of leaves, the slow, steady rhythm of life picking itself back up. And then there's the simple act of surviving. It doesn't feel like much, but in a world that's seen so much death, so much destruction, just holding on is an act of defiance. Every day you wake up and do the work, tend the fields, care for the animals, fix the fences. It's a small triumph, not over the Lord or the church, but over the chaos of the world itself. You've learned, in the most painful of ways, that survival is not just about avoiding death. It's about finding meaning, finding hope, even in the smallest of things. As you sit by the fire at night, the glow of the flames casting long shadows on the walls of your home, you think about all that's happened, the plague, the famine, the wars. But you also think about the small victories, the way the earth yields, the way the community has come together, the way the sun rises each morning, bringing with it a new day, a new chance to survive. In the end, that's all you can ask for. The years continue to pass with their quiet, inevitable rhythm, and though much has changed, you find yourself drawn to the same simple routines. The world has grown quieter, the shadow of the plague still hanging in the corners of your thoughts, but the urgency of survival has faded. Now it's a quieter fight, one not so much against death itself, but against the monotony of life that seems to stretch endlessly before you. You've endured the worst, and now you simply live without the same sense of dread you once had. In the village, the ebb and flow of daily life carries on much as it did before, but there's a weariness to it now. People don't work with the same ferocity they once did, though they work hard enough. You notice that the land is beginning to yield more freely. The crops, while still sparse compared to the abundance of the past, have grown more dependable. The animals you raise are fatter, healthier, and the world feels just a little more alive. The soil, though still scarred from the past, seems to have reclaimed some of its strength. You've learned to respect it in ways you hadn't before, understanding its deep, quiet wisdom, its ability to endure and heal. You've also come to appreciate the company of the few people who remain in the village. The bonds that were forged in the crucible of plague are unbreakable now. You all understand each other in ways that don't need words. There's a connection, a shared history that binds you in ways no one else can quite understand. You've seen so much lost together, faced the same struggles, and in some ways, that shared experience has made the village more of a community than it was before. The Lord still demands his tribute, though his once unchallenged authority has eroded. He's not the same man he was, and you're not the same peasant. The power dynamics, while not entirely shifted, feel different. The Lord's hands, once wrapped tightly around the land, seem to loosen just a little. You've seen the way he holds his head a little lower these days, the way his eyes occasionally flicker with a hint of uncertainty. He's not the invincible figure he once was, and though he hasn't entirely lost his power, it's clear that the world has changed beneath his feet. Historians still debate whether the plague fundamentally weakened the feudal system or if it was simply a matter of time before changes came anyway. But the fact remains, there's a subtle shift in the way things work now. The relationship between the Lord and his peasants is not what it was. It's not that you feel entirely free. There are still the same obligations, the same duties, but there's a quiet understanding that the old ways can't hold forever. The Lord may still hold sway over the land, but you've seen the cracks in the armor, the ways in which his power is more fragile than it used to be. The church, too, has changed, though it holds on to its power more tightly than the Lord does. The priest continues to deliver his sermons, though with less fire and brimstone than before. He speaks now of hope and survival, more than of damnation. You find yourself listening more closely to his words than you did in the past. In a world so deeply scarred, his words feel like a small flickering light in the darkness. And yet, there's something else now, a quiet resistance growing in the village, not against the church, but against the very notion that all answers must come from there. More and more villagers are turning inward, questioning not just their faith, but the very structure of their lives. It's strange, this quiet rebellion. You've seen people begin to practice rituals that don't quite align with the teachings of the church, using herbs, speaking softly to the trees, invoking a kind of magic that feels more ancient than anything the priest can offer. Some of these practices are not new. They're the old ways, long buried under the weight of the church's authority. But now, with the world so different, they've begun to resurface. You've participated in a few of these quiet rituals yourself, unsure whether you believe in them, but finding comfort in the familiarity of the old songs and whispers. It's a kind of spiritual rebellion, an attempt to reclaim something lost in the wake of so much destruction, and maybe, just maybe, it offers something that the church's sermons cannot: peace. Still, you wonder about the future. How long will the quiet shifts in the village last? Will the Lord return to his former ways once the memory of the plague fades? Will the church find its way back to dominance? These questions gnaw at you from time to time, but you know that they don't matter as much as they once did. Life, despite everything, has continued. The village has survived, and it's continuing to build itself back up. For you, that's enough. The nights grow colder as the seasons change, but the work remains constant. You have a rhythm now, a deep, embedded sense of duty that keeps you grounded, even when the world seems full of uncertainty. You work the land, you tend to the animals, and you help your neighbors when they need it. It's a simple life, but in this new world, it's the only life that makes sense. You look around at the familiar sights of the village, the stone walls of the homes, the crooked rooftops, the smoke rising from the hearths, and you can't help but feel a small sense of pride. This place, scarred though it may be, is home. It's a place of survival, of quiet defiance in the face of everything that has come before. And as long as it stands, so too will you. It's not a life of great adventure or glory, but it's a life of perseverance. And in the end, that might be the most important thing of all. As the years grow longer, you begin to realize that survival is no longer just about getting by. It's about rebuilding, refashioning your life from the shards of what came before. In the quiet of the evenings, when the work is done, and the day's labors have left you exhausted but content, you can't help but notice the difference in how you see the world. The land that was once a battlefield, a place of constant struggle, now feels like a partner in your life. It's not just about the crops that grow, though they grow in greater abundance now, but about the way the earth listens to you, the way it responds to the seasons, the way it teaches you something new with each passing year. Your farm, once a bare patch of land struggling under the weight of famine and plague, now hums with life. The fields are full, and there's a sense of abundance that's hard to grasp at first. The air smells sweeter, the earth richer. It feels like the village, your life, is healing. And though there's no grand ceremony to mark the occasion, you feel the change in every part of your existence. The other villages have grown quieter in their own way. Perhaps it's the weight of all that has been lost, but there's a kind of solemnity that hangs in the air. The laughter of children, while it echoes through the streets more often now, is tinged with something else. An awareness of the fragility of life, a deeper understanding of what it means to endure. You see it in the way your neighbors work, in the way they share stories over supper. It's as if the years have made you all more mindful, more connected to the simple, vital rhythms of life. As for the Lord, well, He remains the Lord, but the changes are hard to ignore. His authority is still there, but it's no longer an absolute force. You've seen Him walking among the villagers more often than you did before. It's a strange sight. Him, The once untouchable ruler of all you could see, now a man just like the rest of you, moving with the weight of his own burdens. You don't speak to him directly. His commands still echo through the village, and you still offer him your share of labor. But there's a distance now, a kind of quiet understanding between you. You're no longer the same as you were when the plague first came, and neither is he. The land has taken its toll on everyone, even those who once held all the power. You still have your role in the village, your daily labor, your rituals, your duties, and yet something has shifted inside you. Maybe it's because of the years of hard work and survival, or maybe it's simply the passage of time. But you can't help but feel a growing sense of responsibility to your community, to the land, to the future, which seems less certain but more yours to shape than it once did. The Lord's power has waned, yes, but your sense of agency, of purpose has grown. You're no longer just surviving. You're part of the story, and that matters more than anything. You've begun to take part in the village meetings now, not as a passive observer, but as an active participant. The villagers gather in the common space, usually after the evening meal, and share ideas about how to make things better. It's small, humble work. How to organize the harvest better, how to mend fences, how to make sure the children are learning. But there's a power in it, a quiet strength. In a world that's constantly shifting beneath your feet, these small, deliberate acts of rebuilding are as important as any grand rebellion or revolution. The church, too, has shifted. The priest, still a figure of reverence, has softened over the years. His sermons still speak of God's mercy, but now they emphasize community more than punishment. There's talk among the villages of forming new traditions, ones that blend the old ways of worship with the practices that have been quietly revived. You've heard stories of ceremonies held at the edge of the forest, by the river, places that were once considered sacred, but that now hold a different kind of magic. It's not quite heresy, but it's certainly not sanctioned by the church. And though it's a delicate thing, a dangerous thing to embrace in public, there's something about it that feels right. The old ways, the earth's ways, are calling back to you. The priest has become more like a shepherd than a ruler, guiding the community with gentle words and quiet counsel, but not ruling with an iron fist. The villagers seem to trust him more now than ever before, but there's still a hesitation, a wariness that remains. No one wants to go back to the way things were. No one wants to return to a time when the church and the Lord were unquestionable powers, when the very air was thick with fear and duty. But there's a balance now, a strange peace that sits between the old and the new. You find yourself thinking often about the future, about the children in the village who will inherit this place. What will they know of the plague? Will it become a distant story, something told around the fire to younger generations who can barely grasp the reality of what came before? Or will it remain etched into the collective memory of the village forever, a constant reminder of what you all survived? It's hard to say. What's certain is that the village will continue to change. It always does. The land will continue to shift and reshape. The seasons will continue to cycle, and life, in its quiet, stubborn way, will continue to evolve. And for you, there's something deeply comforting in that. Change may come, and there may be hard days ahead, but for now, the village stands, and you stand with it. The future feels uncertain, but it's yours. You've survived the worst. And now you're part of something new, a community that's healing, a land that's slowly recovering, and a world that's learning, slowly but surely, how to begin again. As the years stretch onward, the quiet restoration of your village settles into a deeper rhythm. The changes that have swept through the land, though subtle, have solidified into something that no longer feels like a temporary adaptation, but a new way of life. The work continues, yes, but now it's almost effortless in its familiarity. Each task, whether it's tilling the soil, repairing the fence, or preparing food for the long winter ahead, feels as though it's woven into the fabric of your being. It's no longer just survival. It's a continuation of the work that you and those before you have carried on since time immemorial. You've seen other villages, of course, those that were not so fortunate, where the scars of plague and famine never healed. Their streets are still quiet, their homes still abandoned, their people few. You've heard stories from travelers who've passed through, of places where despair lingers in the air like a fog. It's strange then to think of how different your village is now. It's alive, breathing with the quiet energy of those who refuse to let go of the land, those who remain because there's something worth holding on to, no matter how small. You've come to understand that survival is not a singular act, but a long process, sometimes mundane, sometimes difficult, but always necessary. The people around you, the faces you've seen for years, they're all part of it. They've shared the same hardships, the same grief, and now they share the rebuilding too. In the evenings, when the work is done, there's a soft contentment that comes with sitting together by the fire, hearing the murmur of voices around you. There's a sense of shared responsibility, but also a deep, unspoken understanding of what it means to have come through the worst of it. And then there's the land. It's still fragile, still scarred by the trials it's endured, but there's a quiet resilience to it. The trees have begun to grow back. The fields have begun to yield more fruit than before, and the soil seems to carry less of the weight of death. You've seen how the land has begun to heal, how the earth itself responds to the care and respect you've given it. You don't take it for granted. Every season is a gift, every harvest a reminder of the struggles you've faced and the ones yet to come. But for now, the rhythm of life feels steady, familiar, as though you're walking a path that others have walked before you. You can't predict the future. You know the world is full of uncertainty. There are rumors of war, whispers of more plagues, and the ever-present shadow of your Lord's influence still looms. But for now, you're here, and for now, that's enough. The small victories of daily life, of planting seeds, tending to animals, and working with your neighbors to maintain what you've built. These are the moments that matter most. You know there are no guarantees. Tomorrow is never certain. But as long as the earth continues to yield, as long as the sun rises and sets, as long as there's still work to be done, you'll keep going. In a world that's seen so much destruction, so much loss, the simple act of surviving has become something sacred. The land, the community, the bonds between you and those around you, all of these are sacred. There's a beauty in survival, in finding joy even when it seems impossible, in planting your feet firmly in the earth and saying, I am here and I will stay. That is the true victory. And in the quiet of your small home, with the fire crackling softly in the hearth, you allow yourself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, the worst is behind you, that the future, while still unknown, holds more promise than it did all those years ago. You've survived, and in that, there's hope. Hope for tomorrow. Hope for the generations to come. Hope for a life that, while never perfect, as the moon rises high over the village and the last of the evening light fades into darkness, you settle into the warmth of your bed, the gentle sounds of the village's nocturnal life surrounding you. The world outside is quiet, but inside your heart there's a steady pulse, a reminder that no matter what comes next, you will endure. The village will endure, and life, in its simplest, most resilient form, will continue. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.